Welcome into the Paul Farrington Show. Paul joined by Robert Ziggy Ziegler at the University of Virginia for an emergency podcast of sorts. I don't know if I'd call it a true emergency podcast, but you know, when we're generally scheduled to not be recording in the middle of the day on Tuesday, I guess that it can qualify as one, Ziggy. So Jaire Alexander, some breaking news on Jaire today that the Packers, and this we're going to get into this in a second here because Ziggy's a little upset with the way the reporting has been done. The Packers are attempting to restructure the Jaire Alexander contract and bring him back for the 2025 NFL season. It'd be a pretty huge move for Green Bay. We think that there's actually some meat to this story here. I know that Jaire's been brought up in the news a lot this season or this offseason, and a lot of times it seems that there's not really much to the actual stories that are breaking. It's just, all right, we're going to continue to push this narrative down the road for a few weeks, maybe a couple months, and we'll revisit it then. This time, Ziggy and I both agree that there's something more to it, and we're going to get into that in just a second. Before we do start, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. We're going to continue to have breaking reactions all off-season. When they happen, we'll have our regular shows on Tuesday and Thursday. Apologies for no video this morning. It was Memorial Day. We decided to take off. We'll be back to our regular schedule the rest of this week and going into next week. So, Ziggy, let's start off with this, okay? Why are you upset, first off, with the restructuring term? And then secondly, can you explain a little bit of the financial side briefly for the audience of what's happening?
Sure. So a restructure is when you take money you're already going to pay a player and just give it to them sooner and like a signing bonus so you can spread it out over time. The Packers are not there with Jaire Alexander. They are trying to negotiate a pay cut. Now, my guess is it's being talked about this way because I think a lot of what the Packers want to do is move the money into things like per game bonuses, workout bonuses, maybe all pro stuff, just like things to reward him for actually being on the field and playing. Because Jaire Alexander has not done a lot of that over the past couple of years. He's missed almost every game the past 2 seasons. But regardless, they're trying to do something big. They are trying to come up with a number that both sides can be happy with that'll actually have him returning. Because the reality of this situation is Jaire Alexander, and I think he knows this, at least at this point, simply cannot play for the Green Bay Packers for $17 million in fully guaranteed salary this year. That's just not going to work. Mm-hmm. So that's the situation. I think they're trying to negotiate. We've seen this from the reporting, per game bonuses, performance escalators, that sort of stuff. But the Packers have to get this figured out pretty soon if they want to bring him back. The June 1st deadline is coming. They have a lot of cap space this year. They have very little cap space next year. After June 1, if you cut him, you are pushing about $10 million into next year. They do not want to do that. Mm-hmm. Also, mandatory minicamp is coming up. Jaire Alexander has always sort of done his own thing with that. I don't know if you remember, Paul, a couple years ago. Jaire Alexander missed mandatory minicamp, and then when nothing was going on, he just decided to like show up. So who knows what's going on, but he said he's going to do it. And if Jaire Alexander gets hurt at minicamp, and it's Jaire Alexander, so there's a chance he gets hurt at minicamp, and you haven't negotiated a new deal and you haven't cut him, you owe him every single dollar for this year until he gets healthy. The Packers just cannot let that happen. So I would expect within a few days, mandatory minicamp starts June 10th. You will certainly get a resolution before then. But I think realistically, if June 1st passes and he's not gone, he's going to be staying with the team.
And we've been talking about this entire offseason as it's moved closer and closer to the season starting. It's kind of becoming clear that both sides need each other to a certain degree here. If Jaire, one, really likes being in Green Bay, wants to compete, good organization, probably in terms of maximizing his profits too, even with the renegotiation, as you said, I'm imagining the Packers would be the number one source of income for Jaire Alexander compared to any other team across the league. I would be very surprised to see other teams giving as much money. Now, who knows how much that number will officially be for Green Bay? But given the injury history, like you said, he's played in 16 of a possible 37 games over the last 2 years. A lot of teams, regardless of how good you are hesitant to spend that kind of money on an injury-prone player. But nonetheless, the Packers are that one team that fits the bill quite well. We actually need this guy, and we need him to be healthy. Because whether or not you believe in Carrington, Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, and Nate Hobbs, any Packer fan, any reasonable Packer fan, will acknowledge that you do need a little bit more. especially when you're playing against Jared Goff and the Lions. You're playing against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. At least if you want to be in that conversation, right, with the top dogs in the NFC, there are some really good receivers and really good quarterbacks that you're going to need to slow down. And we've said it this entire offseason, Ziggy, the best path for this Packer defense to be elite, and you are going to need an elite defense, is to have Jaire play and have him be healthy. If he's not on that team, there's a lot of questions in the secondary. They might be passable, no pun intended, but they will not be elite. And that's to me the one path for them to have a defense that's as good as they're hoping in year 2 with Jeff Hafley. So to me, it makes total sense to have Jaire come back. And as far as these sorts of situations go, these relationships that could get contentious, I think it's been pretty amicable. Obviously, we're not behind the scenes, but Jaire keeps saying, as you mentioned, he wants to be with the Packers. The Packers seemingly keep saying that they want Jaire. Now you just make that number happen before it gets into a situation, as you mentioned, with potential contract issues with the post June 1st or after June 1st. So would you agree with that both these teams or both these sides need each other?
Yeah, and I think you talked about it being amicable. I think if this discussion were happening after the 2023 season, it would be a little bit different. But both sides have, I think, sort of cooled off and moved on from that end of season. I mean, I remember Matt LaFleur coming out and saying when Jaire Alexander made himself captain, that was sort of the last straw.
That was
Jaire
pretty
Alexander
crazy.
saying, yeah, I took it personally when my teammates didn't make me a captain. Like, all of that was sort of a mess. But if you look at the Packers secondary this year, I know internally they're both very high on both Keyshawn Nixon and Nate Hobbs, but you're asking 2 career nickel corners to move outside. Now, maybe they'll both be great, but I really don't like your plan being we've got 2 outside positions to fill. We're going to put 2 guys out there for the very first time, not the very first time in their careers, but their very first time playing primarily those roles. When you've got to face, as you said, Justin Jefferson. You got to face Amon-Ra St. Brown. You've got to face whoever the Bears are putting out this year. Maybe that's not so scary. You look at the schedules this team has to play. There's a lot of guys there. And Jaire is not checked out, right? I mean, he's been working out with Xavier McKinney frequently this offseason. Derek Ansley, their defensive passing game coordinator, said he's been talking with Jaire Alexander every single day. This, I think, at this point is just a financials negotiation. And when both sides need each other, when Jaire wants to come back, I believe, as you say, he's not getting more money outside of Green Bay because the Green Bay Packers already have so much committed to him. But even setting that aside, I think he'd probably be willing to play for Green Bay, even if it meant not squeezing out every single dollar. Because this is a competitive team where he will get a chance to play well with guys he likes. We've said it all offseason. I never understood the talk about Jaire leaving unless the relationship was beyond repair. We knew he wanted to come back. What this offer means is the Packers have concretely said it's no longer rumors. They want him back. They just have to find a dollar number that'll make sense. And I think they will do that quite easily.
I agree with you there. And as you said before, too, Jaire, remember he was reaching out to Matthew Golden, all the rookies, or at least a few of the rookies who were selected by the Packers. I think he's been still acting, whether or not, he's a captain, he's acting as a leader of the Packers this offseason. And I think that's going to be a theme for Green Bay that'll be vital as we move through training camp and get closer to preseason, is it's time for this team to become more mature. Last year, we talked about, and they still are a very young team, but it's time for them to grow. Last year, we looked at them as that young team that was ready to take the leap. They didn't do that. You saw Romeo Doubs acting out. Christian Watson's, this isn't him, but his dad saying all things during the draft. That wasn't a good sign there. You've had issues with Jaire in the past. Jordan Love was still making some of the mistakes that, in terms of forcing the ball and making, I would say, just some risky decisions.
Yeah, his biggest mistake was pulling his groin.
Obviously pulling his groin, but he was still making some risky decisions with the football across the board, whether it's emotional or on the football field. I think this Packers team can use some growing up. And if Jaire comes back and it's handled the way it's currently been handled, I think that's a good start for this team getting on the track of, okay, we want to take that next step. Let's start taking things a little bit more seriously here. And you're seeing that in most places. Now, hopefully it can turn around quick in the receiver room, which is still having some issues every once in a while with the, Jayden Reed wants to be number one receiver. But I think having Jaire come in and hopefully if it's a resolution that it seems like it's going to be a pretty easy one to come to over the next few days, maybe that could be the start of some changing tides with this Packer team and starting to act a little more grown up, a little more professional here because the window is right now. The window is right now to go on a deep playoff run. It might not be the same in terms of the Lions or the Eagles, teams that are really ready to win right now. But Green Bay, that window is there if they do have some players step up. So I think taking things a little bit more seriously and acting a bit more like adults here, which it seems everyone is starting to do, is a good sign.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's easy to imagine. The Packers were very clearly shopping Jaire earlier this offseason. And if the draft board had gone a little bit differently, I think they would have taken a corner and he'd be gone. It's tough when you clearly care about a team like Jaire does to be sort of publicly shopped like that, have a team sort of looking to move off on you. Then they come back and offer you a pay cut, and your response, at least to the media, is I still want to be there. And that's what he's done. So I think if you were looking for signs that he's grown up and he's there to play football, I mean, the injuries are terrible. It's really unfortunate, but that's not a maturity issue. That's not his fault. Like, nobody has been saying in Green Bay he's getting hurt because he's not working hard or he's not doing workouts or he's in terrible shape. He's just gotten unlucky. So you have to adjust the money for that. That's true. But I think the relationship is in a very different spot than it was in 2023. And bringing Jaire back gives them a chance to have an elite defense. The defense was good last year without him. I think many people have forgotten that. The pass rush was okay. The secondary was very good. But when Jaire is healthy and he's playing at his best, he's one of the 5 best cornerbacks in the entire NFL. Right, he's certainly the best cornerback in the NFC North if he's healthy. Like, I don't think there's anybody even that's very close. This guy's an incredible football player.
I think I wouldn't say Byron Murphy is in the running with Jaire when he's healthy, or Jalen Johnson's pretty good. I mean, there are some good NFC North cornerbacks.
Yeah, they're good, but Jaire Alexander, when he's playing his best, is an unanimous first team all.
Yeah, he is a claim when he's playing his best to being the best cornerback in football, and Byron Murphy and Jalen Johnson do not.
Yeah, people have totally forgotten about this guy. So I think if you can sign him on an incentive-heavy deal, maybe make this the last year of the contract, that could actually be exactly the thing you need to unlock all-pro Jaire Alexander. And I think if there's 4 words that you can hear in Green Bay next year, I mean, all-pro Jordan Love is the thing you want to hear most. All-pro Jaire Alexander might be number 2.
You really don't understand until you start getting diced for 350 yards a week just how bad an inexperienced or an unprepared secondary is for your team. And like, look, that's what the Vikings had when Xavier Rhodes fell off following the 2017 season. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember.
Yeah. Those Xavier. Are the years.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And then
Xavier
you go to the playoffs and you're just mauled.
Yeah, no, but it's just when you have a secondary that can't cover anyone, you can't win. Like, it's really hard to win when you're just in shootouts week in and week out. Look what happened to the Detroit Lions. Other than that Viking game, their offense could put up points with the best in the league. But at some point, if your quarterback has a bad game like Jared Goff did in the playoffs and he throws 3 interceptions, you can't stop a nosebleed. You're going to lose. And I don't think the Packers were in a situation where it would be that bad. Again, those guys.
But when you're counting on guys to play roles they haven't done before, I mean, they could be great, but there's a lot of variance there. And it just takes one injury in that room.
That's a big thing.
It's getting tough.
One injury for that locker room with those 3 guys, and you're really in trouble. Now you can be looking at that can't stop a nosebleed type of a defense. But even with the 3 of them, you have Jaire Alexander come in. It slots everyone into their natural positions a lot more. You're not extending people into roles that are that are above their pay grade. And I think that helps, obviously, the entire defense. You cover a little bit better. You give a little bit more time for the pass rush to get home, and vice versa. If someone steps up on the defensive line like they need, helps the secondary out. If you get to the quarterback a step faster. So just that domino effect of, one really, really good player helping out the entire team is possible. And Jaire Alexander is a dude who can do that. There are not many of them in the NFL, and a healthy Jaire Alexander can. So we've been on this basically the entire offseason. We would love to see Jaire Alexander leave. because we're
I mean,
Vikings
if he
fans.
leaves and goes to Minnesota, by the track record, he'll be great for us.
Yeah, he'll have one great year, and hopefully that would coincide with JJ McCarthy's breakout rookie year. But I'd love to have Jaire leave, and my mantra is when you do things that your fan base likes, probably not a great decision. When you do things that your fan base dislikes, probably the right decision. So bringing back Jaire on a healthy deal for both sides here, to me, would be the right move for the Packers. I think that would be a smart decision from them, and it would not make me happy.
I've got one more question actually before we end this video, because I'm just thinking here, right? The offseason's basically over. Like, players have mostly, Jaire Alexander sort of the last domino among the like top.
Well, Jalen Ramsey too.
Yeah, but I don't know what's happening in Miami, honestly. I've sort of given up on that. But so think of the top tier NFC contenders, right? Philadelphia, Detroit. You can move it down a tier and add teams like Washington, like the teams that are trying to win the NFC next year.
Yeah.
Is there any team that's made an addition that would be bigger than healthy Jaire Alexander?
I think Washington adding Tunsil and potentially a healthy Debo. Washington's had a couple moves that could be huge.
Yeah, so Tunsil I'll give you. Single player, though, I think that's it in terms of level of impact that a healthy Jaire Alexander would have.
Detroit, the DJ Reed swap with what's his
DJ
face?
Reed is not Jaire Alexander.
No, he's not. I'm just saying that was the swap too with Carlton Davis. That's not as much. NFC contender. Anyone in Philly? I think Philly had more of losses this year than additions.
Minnesota hasn't added anybody huge.
I mean, the Vikings had a couple pretty big. Collectively, I think most of these teams had, like, Washington had a better offseason than the Packers. The Vikings had a better offseason than the Packers.
Yeah, but if you get healthy Jaire Alexander at a good price, I think the Packers will have made, single player wise, maybe the biggest addition of any NFC contender.
Yeah, if single player wise, you can make that argument.
He didn't play last year, really. You didn't get to see what that team looked like with a healthy Jaire.
But I do want to add,
you're wondering, can they take that big step forward? He'd have to help.
I mean, I do want to add in, though, that's asking for a lot. That is, like, we have to acknowledge that is getting healthy all-pro Jaire Alexander when he hasn't played for 2 full years, really, consistently. That's asking a lot. It's possible. I think it's on the table, but what's more likely?
I agree it's asking for a lot, but if you're asking why are we so worried about Jaire returning? Why do we want him to leave as Vikings fans? Why is this sort of big news? Why is everybody talking about this? Why does it not make sense for him to leave, I think? Because he can be a genuine difference maker on a team where we've said over and over again this offseason. This team is full of talented, competent players. What they need is a couple difference makers on both sides of the ball. They need a difference maker at a skill position on offense that's not Josh Jacobs, and they need a difference maker or two on defense.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it's quite possible Jaire comes in and plays at CB1 level, but playing at all pro, that's where you're a Packers fan. That's wishful thinking to me. It's possible, but that's wishful thinking. If he comes back, you're expecting to get cornerback 1 level play from Jaire when he's available. That just leads to the whole other question of, is he going to be able to stay healthy? So there's tons of questions around Jaire Alexander, but yes, bottom line is the door is open to him being very good and improving this whole defense vastly. You look at that secondary then, and you have 2 stars with Jaire and Xavier McKinney instead of just Xavier back at safety. So yes, I am, and I always say this, right? I am one of those guys, when you talk about great players, Jaire Alexander is not a legendary player the way that I normally have this take, but I typically believe that these great players have a little bit more gas left in the tank. And how old's Jaire right now? Was he like 28, 29?
Yeah, you can still get good years out of him. This guy
this isn't a situation like Aaron Rodgers where we're talking about, you know, a 40-year-old coming in and having one more magical ride. If Jaire Alexander gets a little healthy, you could get a few more. He'll be 28
until the Super Bowl next year.
You'll have a couple more very good seasons out of him. But these great players, I always do believe in their ability to bounce back. So there you have it. Jaire Alexander, it looks like we'll be returning to the Packers. I'm sure we'll have an instant reaction when this actually happens. When we'll say the restructure or the renegotiation is complete. But until then, I guess we will have to wait a little bit longer. But this was the biggest news on this story of the offseason. That the Packers do truly want him back. Jaire wants to be back. Something will probably happen. And I mean, look, on November 12th or week 12, we'll just have to sit back and enjoy Justin Jefferson ripping him for 200 yards in Lambeau Field. That's what we have to look forward to with this news. So, all right, for Ziggy and Paul, we'll be back on Thursday with some more of the Paul Farrington Show.